It seems patently obvious that no one in their right senses would want to argue against the importance of trying to make Israelis and Palestinians make peace among themselves. Suddenly talk of the need to do just that is in the international air again. The need to push Israelis and Palestinians towards peace is a firm argument advanced in Washington, both by the Iraq Study Group, headed by James Baker, and also by George W. Bush's stalwart international ally, Tony Blair. Peace between Israelis and Palestinians is indeed a noble goal, but right now, is it really feasible? Do Israelis and Palestinians believe it is feasible right now? For his part, President Bush seems to be striving dramatically and determinedly to ward off the pincer play, as both the British Prime Minister and the authors of the Baker Report press for acceptance of the principle that to solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict will not merely help the United States out of its Iraq quagmire, it will prove the catalyst for a new wholesome US strategy in the Middle East. In truth, what makes proposals for a fresh US peace initiative right now suddenly look more reasonable is that all of a sudden the fierce heat seems to have gone a little out of the conflict. A ceasefire between Hamas and the Israeli military is by and large holding, and there is even talk of perhaps trying to expand it to the West Bank as well. Now, the idea of a comprehensive peace seems so attractive that some puzzle over why President Bush hesitates so. Why, some even ask, does he appear so reluctant? Is it because he is enthralled to Israel's settlement policy? Or is it perhaps because the president is convinced that Hamas doesn't want peace at all, but the elimination of Israel? Or could it be this, that President Bush wants first himself to be surprised by a constructive approach on the part of the parties themselves? Washington has indeed once again, been blindsided by developments in the conflict, as in 1993 with the Oslo peace process, and also a decade later with Ariel Sharon's unilateral withdrawal from Gaza. So too now, the recent commitment by both Palestinian and Israeli leaders to halt the spiraling hostilities in Gaza was their initiative and theirs alone. So perhaps it's simply that the president understands that the last thing that the conflict needs is to get back on the bumpy roadmap to peace, or to head towards another all-embracing Madrid-style peace conference, such as Baker helped produce 15 years ago, and which he now advocates repeating. In recent years, though, regrettably, the conflict has regressed to basics. The priority of each side is now its own very existence. In contrast to the peace years of the 90s, when for the first time in their 100-year conflict, Israelis and Palestinians had tentatively begun to reach out to one another, not just recognizing the other's existence, but acknowledging the existence of the other's historic pain. With the Palestinian Intifada uprising, that process was not only reversed. Each side finds that in order to erase its own pain, it has to inflict more pain on the other. Still, not all is gloomy. The ceasefire has positioned both leaderships to move further forward. And although the Hamas Palestinian Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh said bluntly in Tehran recently that never ever would Hamas recognize the legitimacy of Israel's existence, still the militant group does express readiness to consider Hudna, a long-term ceasefire. And in the wake of the Gaza ceasefire, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has responded to Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas's persistent declarations of a readiness to engage in peace negotiations, with his own explicit commitment again to begin moving down the negotiating path towards a settlement, if only a serious Palestinian partner does emerge. That's where international efforts should be focused, on further erosion of the Israeli occupation, while appreciating just how unlikely it is that most Israelis will accept more than what Ehud Olmert proposed and on what he was elected last March. That is to say, for Israel to withdraw from a large chunk of the West Bank, but not from all of it. Talk of peace and talking of peace is fine, but the temptation has to be resisted to avoid being swept away by the rhetoric of peace. Full-scale peace is simply not at this stage attainable. What is achievable is the pushing of the two sides towards a long-term, interim, non-confrontational arrangement between them, where pointedly long-term may mean no more than a few years. Consolidate this no-war, not-yet-peace arrangement between the two nations, and down the line there could yet be hope of a permanent peace. However, unlike what happened last year in Gaza, the effort this time should be on producing a coordinated Israeli withdrawal from parts of the West Bank, which will lead to the creation of a Palestinian state with contiguous boundaries, as Olmert himself has envisaged. So what seems wise for the international community is to encourage the parties to continue talking peace, but not to encourage them to get mired down in the pursuit of full-scale peace talks, as happened at Camp David 6 years ago. That would only bog things down in entrenched positions on final borders, Jerusalem and refugees, and kill off any prospect of the tentative ceasefire persisting. Contrary to simplistic assessments, there is not right now a golden chance for peace. There is, however, a silver chance to create preliminary conditions for partial fulfillment of the Bush vision of a two-state solution, with Israelis and Palestinians living side by side, independently secured from each other, not yet in peace, but not in war either. It's not all that bad, a deal to be pursuing, a goal to be pursuing at this troubled moment in the Middle East.